June 6th, 1944. 10:15 a.m. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's staff car rolled through the gates of his headquarters at La Roche-Guyon. He stepped out, still wearing his dress uniform, the same one he had worn the night before at his wife's 50th birthday dinner in Germany. Then he looked north. The horizon was black with ships, thousands of them, a steel armada stretching from one end of the Norman coast to the other. The sky swarmed with aircraft. The thunder of naval guns shook the chateau's ancient walls. Rommel stood frozen. His chief of staff approached, pale-faced, holding a stack of reports. The invasion had begun 6 hours earlier. Allied forces were already ashore. Paratroopers had seized key bridges. The Atlantic Wall, Rommel's fortress of Europe, was breaking apart. Rommel didn't need to read a single page. He could see the truth from the window. In that instant, one of history's greatest military minds understood something terrible. The war was over. Germany had lost, not in 6 months, not in a year, but today, this morning. The rest was only dying. This is the story of the day Rommel knew. To understand what Rommel saw that morning, you need to understand what he'd built. Erwin Rommel was a legend, the Desert Fox, the man who'd made Churchill's generals look like schoolboys in North Africa. Hitler called him the Reich's finest field commander. The Allies feared him more than any other German officer. In late 1943, Hitler gave Rommel an impossible task: defend 3,000 miles of European coastline from Norway to Spain. The Allies were coming. Everyone knew it. The question was where and when. Rommel inspected the existing defenses and was horrified. The Atlantic Wall was a propaganda myth. A few concrete bunkers, some beach obstacles, nothing that could stop a determined invasion. So Rommel got to work. He poured millions of tons of concrete. He planted 500,000 mines. He installed thousands of obstacles on every beach, steel hedgehogs, wooden stakes, Belgian gates. He flooded fields to trap paratroopers. He positioned artillery to cover every approach. He called it Fortress Europe. He believed in it. But Rommel had one strategic insight that set him apart from every other German commander. He knew Germany couldn't win a long battle. The Allies had too many men, too much material, too much industrial power. Germany's only chance was to stop the invasion at the waterline, destroy it on the beaches. In the first hours, before it could establish a foothold, Rommel told his officers, "The enemy must be annihilated before he reaches our main battlefield. We must stop him in the water, not only delaying him, but destroying all his equipment while it is still afloat." He was right, but he needed one thing to make it work: freedom to move his panzer divisions. Mobile armored reserves that could rush to the invasion site within hours and crush the beachhead before it solidified. Hitler refused. The panzers were placed under central command. They couldn't move without permission from Berlin, without permission from the Führer himself. That decision doomed everything. Rommel had been in Germany when the invasion began. His wife Lucy was turning 50. Rommel hadn't seen her in months. He'd also planned to meet Hitler at the Berghof to argue, one more time, for control of the panzer divisions. He believed the invasion would come in mid-June, based on tide and moon conditions. He was wrong by 10 days. At 6:30 a.m. on June 6th, Rommel received a phone call at his home in Herrlingen. Allied paratroopers had dropped across Normandy. Ships were approaching the coast. This was it. Rommel immediately called headquarters. "Where are the panzers?" They hadn't moved. "Get them to Normandy, now." "Field Marshal, we need authorization from OKW." "Then get it. They're trying to reach the Führer, but what? He's asleep. No one dares wake him. Let that sink in. The largest amphibious invasion in human history was underway. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of men. And Germany's panzer reserves sat idle because Adolf Hitler was sleeping, and his staff was too terrified to knock on his bedroom door. By the time Hitler woke at 10 a.m., gave permission, and the orders filtered through the command structure. It was afternoon. The panzers began moving toward Normandy. They were immediately hammered by Allied fighter bombers. Roads became killing zones. Tanks burned. Columns scattered. Rommel arrived at La Roche-Guyon at 10:15 a.m. The reports were catastrophic. 5 beaches assaulted. Allied troops were inland at 4 of them. At Omaha Beach, the Americans had taken massive casualties, but were pushing off the sand. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, the British and Canadians were linking up. At Utah, the Americans were miles inland. The Atlantic Wall had held for approximately 90 minutes. Rommel moved to the situation map. His staff officers stood in silence. Red markers showed Allied penetration points. Blue markers showed German defensive positions, shrinking by the hour. Someone asked what orders to give. Rommel stared at the map. He calculated distances, reinforcement times, supply routes. He ran through scenarios in his mind. He was arguably the finest tactical commander in the German military. And he saw it all clearly. The panzers would arrive too late. The Luftwaffe had no air superiority. The Kriegsmarine couldn't challenge the Allied fleet. German reinforcements would be bombed to pieces on every road to Normandy. The invasion force would grow stronger every hour while German forces grew weaker. Rommel turned to his chief of staff, Hans Speidel. He spoke quietly, almost a whisper. "We have lost the West." That phrase. We have lost the West. Not the battle is difficult, not we face challenges, not we must fight harder. We have lost. Past tense, already over. 10 hours into the invasion, Rommel knew the war was finished. His staff officers looked at each other. No one spoke. You didn't contradict a field marshal. You especially didn't contradict Rommel. But this was unthinkable, defeatist, dangerous to even hear. Speidel carefully asked what Rommel meant. Rommel walked to the window. He could still see the smoke rising from the coast, 40 miles away. He could hear the distant thunder of naval bombardment. He explained his reasoning with cold logic. The Allies had achieved total surprise. They'd landed with overwhelming force at the moment of Germany's maximum weakness. The panzers were too far away, moving too slowly, and being destroyed piecemeal. Air superiority meant Germany couldn't reinforce or resupply effectively. Most critically, the Allies could replace losses. Germany couldn't. Every tank Germany lost was irreplaceable. Every trained soldier killed meant one less defender. The German military was bleeding out in Russia, Italy, and now France. There were no strategic reserves, no fresh divisions, no miracle weapons that would arrive in time. But the Allies? They had the entire industrial might of America behind them. They could land divisions faster than Germany could destroy them. They could afford to lose battles and still win the war. Rommel had fought the British in North Africa. He knew what they could endure. Now add the Americans, fresh, untested, but unimaginably wealthy in men and material. And the invasion had worked. They were ashore, digging in, building up. The arithmetic was simple. Germany had one chance. Stop them on D-Day, in the first hours, at the waterline. That chance was gone. Rommel knew something else, something he didn't say out loud. Hitler would never allow retreat. Never allow strategic withdrawal. The Führer would demand Germany fight for every inch of France, bleeding the Wehrmacht white in battles they couldn't win. Rommel could see the whole future unfolding. Months of grinding combat. German armies encircled and destroyed. France lost. Germany invaded. Berlin in ruins. He saw it all on June 6th at 10:15 in the morning. The question was, what do you do when you know you've already lost? Rommel didn't surrender. He didn't retreat. He didn't give up. He fought. For the next 7 weeks, Rommel threw everything he had at the Allied beachhead. He was brilliant. He was ruthless. He made the Allies pay for every field, every village, every mile of Norman countryside. The Battle of Normandy became a meat grinder. Allied casualties were staggering. Over 200,000 killed, wounded, or missing by the end of August. The Americans learned that the European war would be nothing like their easy victories in North Africa. The British faced some of their bloodiest fighting since World War I. Rommel made them earn it. He positioned his forces masterfully. He used the Norman hedgerows, ancient walls of earth and vegetation, to create a defender's paradise. Every field was a fortress. Every lane a killing zone. Allied tanks were ambushed and destroyed. Infantry attacks dissolved in storms of machine gun fire. But Rommel was right. The math didn't work. For every Allied soldier killed, 2 more arrived. For every tank destroyed, 3 more rolled off the transport ships. The beachhead expanded. The Allies built artificial harbors, laid fuel pipelines, constructed entire ports from nothing. Meanwhile, German reinforcements were bombed to pieces before they reached the front. Supply convoys were strafed. Fuel ran out. Ammunition ran low. Rommel watched his divisions shrink from exhaustion, attrition, and relentless Allied firepower. He traveled constantly to forward positions, trying to plug holes in the line. His staff begged him to stay back. Field marshals didn't belong in combat zones. Rommel ignored them. He seemed almost suicidal, driving through areas under artillery fire, appearing at the front when Allied planes controlled the skies. On July 17th, his luck ran out. British fighter bombers caught his staff car on a country road near Sainte-Foy-de-Montgomery. They strafed it. Rommel was thrown from the vehicle, his skull fractured, his face torn open. He nearly died. He was in the hospital when the final disaster came. Operation Cobra. The Americans broke out of the beachhead, smashed through the German lines, and flooded into open country. The war in France was over, just as Rommel had predicted. But by then, Rommel was involved in something far more dangerous than fighting the Allies. He was part of a conspiracy to kill Adolf Hitler. Not because Rommel was a Democrat, not because he opposed Nazism on moral grounds, but because he'd done the math. Germany was going to lose. The only way to save anything, save German cities from destruction, save German soldiers from pointless death, was to end the war. Hitler had to go. The July 20th plot failed. Hitler survived the bomb. The conspirators were rounded up, tortured, executed. The Gestapo investigated everyone connected to the plot. They found evidence linking Rommel. On October 14th, 1944, 2 generals arrived at Rommel's home. They gave him a choice: stand trial for treason, guaranteeing his execution and his family's destruction, or take poison and die as a hero. His family would be spared. He'd receive a state funeral. His reputation would remain intact. Rommel chose poison. He was 52 years old. The official story was that he died from his injuries. Germany mourned. Hitler sent a wreath. Rommel received the state funeral he'd been promised. The truth didn't emerge until after the war. So what really happened on June 6th? What did Rommel actually see? He saw the end of an era, the end of the Wehrmacht's myth of invincibility, the end of the belief that superior tactics and fighting spirit could overcome material disadvantage. Rommel had built his reputation on winning battles he shouldn't have won. In France in 1940, outnumbered but audacious. In North Africa in 1941-42, undersupplied but brilliant. He'd made the impossible look routine. But D-Day taught him something he'd always known intellectually, but had never fully felt. Genius can't beat geometry. Tactics can't overcome logistics. Courage can't defeat mathematics. The Allies had more. More ships, more planes, more tanks, more men, more fuel, more ammunition. More industry, more everything. They could afford mistakes. They could absorb casualties. They could outlast any defense. Rommel wasn't defeated by Eisenhower's strategy or Montgomery's tactics. He was defeated by Detroit factories and Pennsylvania steel mills and Texas oil fields. By a war economy so vast it could supply two separate theaters, Europe and the Pacific, simultaneously, and still have surplus. Standing at that window on June 6th, Rommel understood what many Germans wouldn't grasp until Berlin fell. This war was never winnable. The question was never, can we win? The question was, how much will we lose before it ends? He knew the answer. Everything. There's a photograph of Rommel from May 1944. He's inspecting beach obstacles in Normandy 1 month before D-Day. He's smiling, confident. He believes in the Atlantic Wall. There's another photograph from July, weeks after the invasion. Rommel looks 20 years older, exhausted, haunted. He knows. History remembers Rommel as one of Germany's finest generals. That's probably true. But his real genius wasn't tactical brilliance. It was seeing clearly. He saw the truth before anyone dared to speak it. On June 6th, while other German commanders were still talking about throwing the Allies back into the sea, Rommel understood that the war was over. While Hitler raged about wonder weapons and final victory, Rommel calculated the math and saw only defeat. That clarity cost him everything: his reputation, his position, ultimately his life. But he was right. The war in the West was lost on D-Day. The rest was just determining the body count. Rommel knew it at 10:15 a.m. on June 6, 1944. Standing at a window in a French chateau, watching the horizon burn, he saw the truth, and the truth killed him.